Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am your host, Liv. Okay, so today's conversation episode, like I hinted last week, is particularly suited to the god Apollo from this past week's regular episode, and that is because I spoke with Bettina Joy De Guzman, who is a singer and songwriter and musician of songs either in ancient Greek or based on ancient Greek poetry and epic, which is so utterly fascinating. She plays ancient instruments like the lyre, and she plays a little bit of the barbiton in this episode. We talked all about ancient music and ancient epics, Homer and the Homeric hymns. We just went off about mythology in general and talked about Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles and Circe. We talked about Achilles in general and all the intricacies surrounding his mother, Thetis. And oh my gosh, there was really so much. We talked a lot about Sean Bean in the movie Troy. Who wants to miss that? Not me. As you'll hear at the end, we talked for about 2 hours. I tried to trim it down because I never know how long is too long, but I couldn't cut out too much, so this is still about an hour and a half long. There's a couple little transition cues in there when we wandered off topic, and I brought it back in the editing, but otherwise we just had such fun, such an incredible conversation. I love that there are people that I can just talk mythology and all of it, in one place. So I really enjoyed this episode. It was really fun speaking with Bettina Joy, and I hope you enjoy it. Her music is incredible, and there's just so much. You can find more about her in the episode's description. There's a link to her website. You can listen to her music, and oh my gosh, so much going on. Ancient music is so fascinating and so cool, and please just enjoy this episode. Conversations, singing the words of Homer, ancient music and lyrics with Bettina Joy De Guzman. Why don't you tell my listeners about yourself and kind of what your whole world is in the classics realm, because I think yours is quite unique in how you do it and how you reach people and everything. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you?
Okay. I am in an interesting space because, for instance, for Harvard University Center for Hellenic Studies, I have 2 appointments this year, which is as an associate. And so it's like research stuff and associate for that. And it's an associate with a grant, which is rare, and also as visiting artist. And I think that pretty much, that's a good way of defining why I'm so oddly or how I'm oddly placed, because I am a classicist. So my training, my 4th degree, as a classicist. The other ones were my bachelor's were in music, English, and psychology, especially developmental and abnormal psychology. And then I went back for my 4th degree by accident, because I just love languages so very much, and it was like my 5th language at the time or whatever. I mean, I've at this point in time I've studied 20. I'm not very good at all of them or anything. But fluency, whatever, there's reading comprehension skills and stuff. But I mean, studying, I intend to live like my grandmother, to be like 100. She's 100. She's turning 101 this year. Wow. So I don't have any limits to myself. Like I must learn by this time. No, it's learning is a process. It's organic, right? So one day I was just like, I've been teaching piano. I was a piano teacher at the time, and that's all I was doing. It was so chill. It was so wonderful teaching children. I was already done with my, with my degrees, and I was like, yeah, I'm just teaching piano and earning quite well for somebody in my 20s. And then I decided, wait, hang on, what is this? Oh, look at that. Latin in the summer. Oh, that sounds like a fun language to learn. And so I went in it, and the TA at the time, the instructor was like, "Who are you? Why are you picking up this language so easily?" And I go, oh, "I'm Filipino. I mean, Filipinos tend to pick up languages and music very easily. Like we're just like known for that."
Mm.
Um, so then they kind of reeled me in and said, "Well, what are your plans? What are you doing? Have you thought about being a major in classics?" I'm like, "No. I mean, I'm already finished my major." They're like, if you go in, there's only 2 years because you only have to do the languages part because you've already done like the major requirements since you already did English. And I'm like, I mean, that's intriguing. Or, I mean, I had at the time at the time that was before my children suck all your energy and money. I swear, So I'm like, yeah, all
That's
right,
why I
okay,
won't have any. I want my
sure.
energy and my money for me.
And I can totally, I understand that. I understand. So there was, and I went in, and I was in like maybe even like 2 semesters, and maybe even the first one, and they were already. It was a new program. It was like back in 2003 or something, and they were like, you know, we could use somebody like you in our PhD program. And at the time, believe it or not, they were offering me a stipend as well as a fellowship
Oh, wow.
and a TA-ship. 3 things. You can't get that now, you
Yeah, I
know.
bet.
And in fact, that program now, they don't have PhD anymore. They only have up to MA.
Mm.
But I went in, and at the time when they were asking me what are your interests, what would it be, what would you be studying, I said theater. So theater, ancient theater, and I said, and also music. And they're like, music? I go, yeah, what did Homer sing? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, we don't know. I go, what do you mean you don't know? At the time they didn't know. And
Yeah.
there were only like a few people who had been looking into it. So there was West, ML West,
Mm.
and he's well known for many things besides music. There's Pullman and West, who was working on ancient Greek music, like they have this book and documents of ancient Greek music and so on. So I looked at that and I thought, this is exciting. And I took a class on meter, and everybody else was like, we have a whole semester on meter, and they're all like, oh my god. And I was like, oh, meter, yay. And they're like, you are so weird, totally. And for that class, I had a lap harp, and because I didn't have a lyre at the time or anything like that. They didn't make, there were no makers of those that
Yeah.
who made it for like the public or anything like that. That was only very recent, like 7 years ago or six, maybe even 6 years ago, when
Wow.
Theatro's music instruments started making it for the public. So anyway, so I just took up my lap harp, and I was demonstrating like, here's a lap harp. It's different from a lyre, and I'm explaining why. And I played a couple songs on it, and they're like, okay, that's cool. And then one of the other professors, Andromachi Karenika, who is now editor of a major journal, and who's still there and who's now my mentor, had overheard. She was walking down the hall and she heard it, and she's like, well, that's lovely. Can you play for my class, my undergrad class? So sure, and we maintained contact, and she's been fabulous. She's worked on things with women and song, basically women at work. What
Mm.
are they singing? Things like that. And if it weren't
Oh,
for
that's
her,
interesting.
I wouldn't have thought about the connection between Penelope working on her weaving and singing at the same time. And it was like
Mhm.
the first major song that I had done by myself. And the first song that I'd done was the Epitaph of Siculus with Michael Levy. And it's funny how I approach people. I just look at the stuff, look at their music, email them, and go, wow, I love that. Can I work with you? And that, I think that seems very like a weird approach to most people. Like, why? I mean, why would you think that somebody would listen to you? I go, I don't know. I just do. But they do.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to try,
You
right?
have to
Like,
try. Yeah.
yeah.
You have to show what you got. So I'm like, oh, I've sung like this song. Here's a quick recording. What do you think of that? And he was like, wow, that would sound really good together. So he took his lyre music and my song, my singing, because he had just been doing lyre music but no actual
Mm.
lyrics. And so that's the oldest complete song that has musical notations.
Hmm.
In so there's it's an ancient Greek song, and then yeah, it's got musical notations, and we put it together, and it became a big hit, I guess, for the ancient world.
Yeah.
People, as far as like
As far as
ancient
classics
world.
big hits
There
go.
you go.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Which are very important. Absolutely.
Of course, of course.
Like, that's
And
all I care about.
I mean, I went into grad school thinking this is great stuff, and nobody knew anything about, not much about ancient music at the time. There was Stefan Hagel. There was a recording of Stefan Hagel, I remember, who is now my friend. But
Mm.
like back then, it was just like a name. Who is this mysterious person singing Demodocus' song? And he only played like four
Oh.
notes over and over again. Now, of course, he says, "Oh, well, we were naive back then. It was a long time ago." I said, "Yeah, our knowledge of ancient Greek music has expanded so much just in the past 15 years since I like left grad school."
Yeah.
So at the time, it wasn't really doing much for me, honestly. And when it came time towards the end, when I was taking my exams already, what was really getting me was like the mythology at the time. And
Mhm.
that was making me excited. And I was like, I want to sing these songs. I was singing Homer, and like nobody can help me with this. And at the time, I already started a family. So, you know, by that point in time, the you could already see the trend was not very good with academic hiring, and me with starting a family. Um, it seemed the best thing to do would be to teach high school Latin, because
Yeah.
I mean, I had grown to love Latin at that point. I also was, loved ancient Greek, but ancient Greek is not being hired in most class in
I mean,
Latin.
even Latin, yeah. Latin is
Yeah,
hard to find teacher like the, places that'll actually teach it. Like, I certainly in high school there was no option for anything like that.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
rare, right? But apparently there were
Mhm.
places in California. It seemed the best thing for me to do, instead of taking this child and putting him around, trying to find a job in various states, right? Begging for a job, to just
Yeah.
take a job in California as a public high school teacher, take my credential work and all that,
Mhm.
and settle down, and enjoy summers and Thanksgivings and Christmases with my baby. And it became a thing, and I settled in, but I never stopped playing music or teaching music, and reading and reading and reading. And to me, music and myth always went together, because I think I always thought of the bard Homer, who was a
Mhm.
total fanficker. you know he because um and this is just my view.
Mhm.
So this is not anything that I've read, but I really feel that Homer didn't like the Olympians. Like, whatever gods he worshipped, maybe they were the Titans, maybe
Hmm.
he just didn't, but he clearly didn't like them. And he was the relationships that he was showing us was that the gods were petty and so on. Those were not in the Homeric hymns, called Homeric, not because
Yeah.
he wrote them, right?
Yeah.
And they were not in the Orphic hymns either. So,
Mhm.
who wrote them? Not, I mean, it's oral tradition, that has the name Homer to it. Whether he was the editor, the person, the school, who knows, right? What is
Yeah.
Homer? But we'll just call him Homer, just to make it
Yeah, it's
easy.
easier.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Demodocus was in there someplace too. Was he real? Was he not? Who knows? But
Yeah.
so there's that oral tradition of a bunch of bards singing a bunch of songs, and this collection, the one that's known as the Iliad, has these gods that are just like powerful but petty.
I see it's interesting. Like yeah, I love, I mean, that's the pettiness of the gods is why I love it. I
It's
almost take it
fun.
as like it's so fun. I mean,
Fun,
that's like why
totally.
I'm here.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
But what I love is to think about, like, it's not necessarily that, Homer, whoever they may be,
Yeah.
um, you know, disliked the Olympians so much as I take it as like really understanding the way they would have been seen back then, which is just like deeply human, like pulling the strings in this deeply human and flawed and obnoxious and weird way. Like, I love the Olympians versus, modern deities, like,
Yeah, yeah,
Christian ideals, because
yes.
they're so much more human in this really accessible and entertaining way, because you're
Yeah,
right. Like,
yeah.
the gods in the Iliad are so over the top in a way that I find so deeply entertaining, and like a little bit less so,
Very.
I guess, in the Odyssey. Like, they're there, but yeah, they're not like they're not petty bitchy little children in the same way that they are in the Iliad.
Yeah, Iliad is so much more fun because you sit there and you go,
Yeah.
okay, now if I were a god and I had that much power, would I do that? Yeah, I would. Yeah, sure I would. I'd behave that
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
I guess that's what I mean. It's like he didn't like them in the sense like he didn't like he was not a worshiper of them. I
Yeah.
should just say.
Well, but maybe the worshiping was still just appreciating that they were like that, Like, like, you could have worshiped them and all of a sudden be like, "Man, you're petty motherfuckers." But like, I worship you, anyway,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and who knows? I just find it all entertaining to think like that. But then, if you think about the Homeric hymns too, like the Hermes hymn
Oh, him
is a
to
pretty
Hermes.
good example
Love
of
that. Love that. Yeah.
it's because it's so good. It's so ridiculous. Like, that's a
Yeah.
pretty good example of similarly ridiculous gods, granted in different
That,
ways and like not
yeah.
interacting with humans in the same way.
Yep.
But like, I mean, he invents the lyre, gives it
Yeah.
up just by like stumbling upon a turtle. That poor turtle.
Tortoise,
A
even.
tortoise, yeah.
Yeah. This one is a replica. I have one in a box that's actual tortoise shell, and so
Yeah.
this is the Barbitos,
Oh wow.
barbiton.
Yeah.
This is the Sappho
Oh right,
barbitos,
yeah.
right? So this
Yeah.
is the one that she had played.
Uh
And I always wondered if one of the Homers, one of the bards, was ever a female bard, but there's
mhm.
unfortunately no evidence that there was ever a female bard. And I need to look that up, and that's one of my research goals. For me, when I say a bard, it's someone who travels and sings stories,
Right.
sings the myths to various. Whereas Sappho seemed to really enjoy a particular place, right, where she is
Yeah.
in her island of Lesbos, and she's well known. I mean, she is like the best singer and composer of poetry, a poet
Mhm.
and singer of it, and lyrist, lyre player, all in
Mhm.
one. And they come to see her, and she performs, and she wins. So she does not travel. I guess to
Yeah,
me,
that's
that
true.
when I think of the bard, I think of this guy like going around in a place and maybe that's why there weren't women, because goodness knows they were,
It
oof,
wouldn't have been that easy to travel around.
not so very much, right? Unsafe
No.
conditions, traveling
Oh
place to
yeah.
place, and singing your songs, and and singing it to different people with various values. So you go somewhere, and Helen, right? Helen
Mm.
never has a description in the Iliad. You never hear it. She does not have blonde hair, dark hair, anything, because she's just the most beautiful woman. But that makes
Mhm.
sense, because a bard going to a strange new location says, "I will sing you a song about the most beautiful woman who caused a war." Oh yes, what did she look like? He looks at the queen and says, "She looked like you, queen, just like you."
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Divine
so
like you.
interesting. It's so funny. Okay, so one of the last people I recorded with earlier this week, we talked about Helen and the beautiful evil, the Kalon Kakon, and how she's not described
She's
and
not
how interesting
described.
it is that she's not described. But and then you have this whole other reason that so makes so much sense. Like, of course, yeah, it's not necessarily some sort of commentary on beauty so much as it is an easy way to make sure that you're also complimenting the people who you're singing for. And that's
That's
so
right.
interesting.
And even
Yeah.
even the goddesses, you get well dressed
Mhm.
goddess, but
Yeah.
not like skin color. You do get owl-eyed Athena, and
Mhm.
it's is it and maybe even gray-eyed Athena. So you
Mhm.
get that. Um, but you kind of wonder, is it because the gray eyes in general, you're thinking sky, you're thinking that just seems to be a logical color for someone with wisdom, or something like that.
Yeah.
But no other descriptions of the other ones. And even Aphrodite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aphrodita, so on. She has no description. I mean, the most beautiful goddess. What was her hair color? Was her skin color? Was
Yeah. There are some
nothing?
references to blonde, isn't there? Not necessarily in Homer, but
Right.
elsewhere, right? I think.
Elsewhere,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, but not Homer.
even among my Greek friends, I had a Greek professor who said insistently that she had to have been blonde. I
Mhm.
forgot why she had that idea, but
Mhm.
then there's Achilles, lion maned Achilles, and various translators would say, "Oh
Mhm.
no, it's describing a lion's hair, the way it's wild or something more than the color." But you ask a Greek, and they would say, "Well, Menelaus had blonde hair. He
Hmm.
was Xanthis." And I have friends with their last name Xanthulis and Xanthus and so on, and it's it means blonde to them. And
Mhm.
both of my friends happen to be blondish blonde, and so they're saying like that is the color, that is what they consider the
Mhm.
color. And I do understand. I listen to the people of the land, like, so among my Greek friends, what is the meaning to you, rather than I hate to say it, but like someone else, a British or American, who might be projecting their ideas onto the culture.
Mhm.
You have to listen to both.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you also have to take into consideration too that like modern Greek, while 100% valid, is also, 2700 years
Yeah.
later, and so
Yes.
it has their own influences of so many millennia of change and everything, and how have they been influenced by that, and then that
Exactly.
gets
Right.
affected as well. Yeah. And when I was there, it was really interesting, like, the things that they would tell me versus what I know. It was interesting. I mean, it's yeah, there's
And
just
what
so
is the
much
meaning to
there.
them? I mean, what is their
Mhm.
reception of it?
Mhm.
Right. Always there's that balance of that's fine. We can be all academic about it,
Mhm.
and this is our meaning of it. But when you take
Mhm.
it back to the people of that land, what meaning is it to you these days in your modern world?
Mhm.
um and
And generationally, it's very different too, of
yeah,
like the
yeah.
age of the Greek person. I learned,
Oh
like
yes,
I was
yeah.
speaking to people, in their early 30s, late 20s, and their viewpoint was very different than a couple of people who would speak to me, who were
Sure.
boomers when like, and then in between. And yeah, it's just sort of very fascinating, sort of taking that in and learning from everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I love traveling and hearing the various folk tradition myths and music, of course, always music, and what it all means, and
Mhm.
how they're putting myths in their music these days. I mean, that's been a thing.
Mhm.
So there's always been, or I should say always, like for generations, in the summers there's plays in Greece, always, of the ancient
Mhm.
Greek tragedies, and they had performed them with choruses, singing and dancing. And to various other Europeans or even Americans, they're like, "Oh, this is a new thing we're doing," and I'm thinking it's not new to them. It's that they've been doing it for years and years. It's just you
Yeah.
haven't been paying attention to what the Greeks were doing until now. So,
Mm.
sorry, I'm very Greek focused, just because I was thinking that you've been in Greece and been
Yeah,
there
no, it's
recently.
interesting. Yeah. I did watch, they live streamed a performance of the frogs at
Yeah,
Epidavros. And that
yeah.
was, I watched that, and sort of, it did have subtitles, which was nice, but I was also trying to take in the Greek as well, since I'm trying to learn Greek. And it was really interesting watching the interpretation of that, and it was a beautiful performance of it. It was very cool.
But it just reminds you that in any of the bards, they're singing from place to place. They had to be very aware of who they were singing to.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the more controversial aspects of the Iliad is Achilles and Patroclus.
Mm-hmm.
What was their relationship? And Joel Christensen had said, I forgot where,
Mm-hmm.
but he's offered this thought before, that it's simply that for each space, there were different, attitudes towards love. And so it was hard to say, I guess where it was acceptable to say
Mm-hmm.
Achilles and Patroclus had this sort of love or that sort of love. And so it was purposely vague in the
Mm.
Iliad. And so, you're there are passages where you're so certain it's a love, this the kind that the romantic, absolutely, because why else would you want to be to have your ashes buried in the same, go, who would
Yeah.
do that? And yet, in one of the other what other scenes, Achilles and Patroclus are separately sleeping with two enslaved women,
Mm-hmm.
and never together, and never shows them embrace passionately in a kiss or anything like that. And yet again, back to, well, why would you have your
Well,
ashes mixed together?
and like Achilles's reaction to the death is,
Yes, right.
is over the top, even for, the closest friend. He loses his mind. It's really fascinating to. I mean, I think that's such a interesting and, very appropriate interpretation of it. It sort of fits just for now, even, right? Like the amount that people
Yes.
will interpret it, and how everyone sees it, and the way that translation affects it, and all those different things. It is so interesting.
But
Yeah.
that's why I love both the Song of Achilles by
Mm-hmm.
Madeline Miller, as well as the movie Troy. And people will be like, I
Mm.
hate the movie Troy. Like, I love the movie Troy. How can I love both these things at the same time? Because like most people, I pick and choose which parts I'm looking at
Yeah.
for and loving.
I
So
enjoy most of Troy. I will clarify. I like most of it. I think, there's certain things where, ugh, but
sure.
otherwise, like, I'm with you. I mean, I'll certainly enjoy watching Brad Pitt in Troy. Like,
There
I have
you are.
nothing, I'm not
I love,
against that.
yeah, yeah. Or the actor who for Hector. Oh, him.
Oh my God, Eric Bana as
That
Hector.
Eric
Whew,
Bana and Sean Bean. Come on, come on.
my
Lost
heart,
opportunity.
my heart.
Lost
That
not to have
movie,
the
The
Odyssey.
Odyssey, with Sean
He
Bean would have
oh
been
would have been epic, epic,
like, there's
wonderful.
nothing
Yeah.
that I want more in the world
Yeah.
than that.
Oh, I was excited. I was like, it's Sean Bean. It's 007. No, 006.
Yeah.
006.
Yeah, he's the
Right?
bad guy.
He always plays that ambiguous or
Mm.
ambiguous bad guy, or the one that's complicated. Uh
Boromir.
yeah, right. See?
Yeah.
Always the one that's like, you're all okay, I love you, but like I hate you, but I love you. And yeah,
Yeah. No, it would have
feeling.
been perfect. Agree.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. The only time I ever liked Odysseus was as Sean Bean. I'm like,
Oh,
ooh,
I mean, I
right,
love
right.
Odysseus.
I
He is
know.
my problematic fave, as they
Oh my god. Well,
say.
well, if I see Sean Bean as Odysseus, I can forgive Odysseus. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
hate Odysseus. Every moment of the Odyssey, I'm just like, oh, why,
Oh,
why?
I love him.
Then
I love him
and
so much.
and then I picture Sean Bean. I'm like, oh yeah, never mind, honey. No, it's okay. You be
It's okay. You
you.
can do anything.
You be you now. I forgive you. Yeah. So with the Song of Achilles,
Mm-hmm.
Madeline had asked for me to introduce her, and so I had proposed a song. At the time, I was still playing with the title, and I called it. I might have called it Achilles, Briseis, and Patroclus or something. At this point in time, I'm calling it Achilles, Patroclus, and Briseis in
Mm.
the order. And I had started with Achilles. I knew I had to pick and choose passages and still make it dactylic hexameter. That was one heck of
Wow.
something. Yeah, it was. It really was. And I wanted specifically that it's Achilles calling Patroclus's name. That had to be the beginning, and the ending had to be Patroclus saying Achilles' name. I'm like, okay, all right, good, good. What else do I need in there? I need Briseis in there as well, and it has to be clear in this song that it's a love song. So which lines do I pick and choose from? But I found it. It started
Yeah.
with Achilles calling out to Patroclus when Patroclus had died, and then Patroclus's ghost coming and saying, "Lay not your bones from me, Achilles. Let them be together, just as when we were growing up. Let them be together." And then Achilles saying, "Patroclus, stay, stay, don't go yet, just for a little bit." And it's just like, so I chose the most
Oh.
heart-wrenching moment. And then I interspersed Briseis's voice, which is actually from another book, when she wails, when she
Mm.
first sees Patroclus dead, and she wails and she says, "Patroclus, you're the best," there. And then she's just wailing. And then
Mm-hmm.
back to Patroclus, the very last thing is, "Lay not your bones from me, far from me, Achilles." And
Oh.
that's how I ended it. And to me, that captures that complication of all that, where
Mm-hmm.
Briseis is in the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Briseis was in love with Patroclus, which explains
Mm-hmm.
like that weird passage where that come from. But one of the things that I had noted in that passage of Briseis wailing is that she had said something interesting. It is that she was comforted by Patroclus when Achilles had taken her, by the idea that Achilles was taking her as his wife,
Mm-hmm.
that she would have an actual marriage to Achilles. And that comforted her, because socially she would have been just thrown away. Like, so her status was not just going to be as an enslaved person, but rather someone who was going to be a princess somewhere else. So yes, she
Mm-hmm.
lost her loved ones, and it's horrible. But at least he's trying to give her, like, but at least you're not going to be an enslaved person. You're going to be
Mm-hmm.
a princess in this land. And that was his comforting thought to her. You will be protected. You will not be endangered.
Mm-hmm.
But with Patroclus dead, and Achilles staying to fight, and him dying,
Mm-hmm.
that's no longer going to be her fate. Her fate is
Mm-hmm.
is just to die as an enslaved person. Patroclus can't help her anymore, and promote that idea to Achilles. So it's like there's that too. Yes, that
Mm-hmm.
that aside from the fact that maybe she had a crush on Patroclus or whatever, it's the fact that he was offering to her this small comfort,
Mm-hmm.
after such a horrid fate.
Yeah. Which is, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think that's the thing I'm more conscious of these days, is just paying attention to the story of Briseis and like how I interpret her, because a lot of like that's my issue with Troy, I would say. Like, it certainly wasn't back in the day, but then now the more I watch it, I'm just like the depiction of Briseis and Achilles is like a little when you think about the fact that, yeah, she is
Yeah.
and a completely an abused and horrifically abused enslaved person, but that, yeah. And I think that the other, just Patroclus in general, he seems to come across as that little bit of kindness amongst the rest of the
Yes.
Greeks too, right? He's sort of
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
inherently the nicest of them. He's the best of them. He is the sort of redeeming nature of the Greeks. And so you can kind of see an attachment that would form there, regardless of all of the other things, just because she has this one person who isn't as horrible to her as everybody else,
That's it. A
and
small comfort.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
right. And you would hang on to that small comfort, and then when he's
Mm-hmm.
gone, yeah, there's so many little bits and pieces that can really make you get to the point of why Briseis would have been upset with his death. Is, there's so many little things that he represented to her,
And it's so
which is so
complicated too,
interesting.
though, right? Because
Mhm.
Patroclus himself killed people. I mean, he was a
Yeah.
soldier.
Yeah,
It,
he
it,
wasn't
so it,
flawless at
it's like
all.
he was the nicest of these killers, right?
Yep.
But of course you could see a soldier, on the other hand, as someone who is a protector. As
Mhm.
if you're on that side, if you're on that side,
Mhm.
Hector is your protector. He's slaughtering people, but hey, he's protecting you, so it's okay that he's killing people. So
Mhm.
it's really depending on which side, which perspective you're looking at.
Mhm.
So why do I love Achilles? It's
Yeah.
because I see him, as Thetis' son. That's the main thing. I When I first read, the Iliad, because we had to read it in ancient Greek as opposed to here's the English
Mm.
version, and I think I was trying to understand why I should care,
Mm.
and so I read The Power of Thetis by Laura Slatkin, who's a dear friend and mentor to me now. And it was incredible. It was an incredibly moving thing. So imagine that this is my first introduction to it, rather than any other way, not as Achilles the Glorious, whatever, but as Thetis' son. So I think it always just sort of fixed itself in my brain like that, where her central question was, why is the hero of the Iliad the son of Thetis, as opposed to, the son of Zeus? Why?
You also have the interesting, the idea that Thetis was meant, or that Zeus like stopped her from marrying anyone powerful because her son was supposed to be greater than him.
Oh yes.
Right?
That's why that
That's
book is the power of Thetis. Like, what did she mean? And in various, if you look at her name, Thetis, it's related to Tithemi, which is to place. And so they think that she's really one of the creator gods. And so she had that power, before they formed the whole Olympian framework, right? That she was one of the goddesses that actually had extreme power like that. And so when they wove her into to their myths, into the Olympian myths, they still couldn't get rid of the fact that she had this sort of innate power. Whatever she had, it's huge. So, in that awful myth where she was forced by the gods, really, it was their ideas, that a mortal should force her down and impregnate her and then make him his own, in a very brutal way, right? That's how she would then be forced to have this half mortal child. And I wrote this poem that is all about, I called it the lullaby of Thetis, and it's all about her goodbye to Achilles. He's dead. And so she starts by saying, what wrath should I sing? Should I start with this, your origins, which is this? Should I start with that? Should I be angry about that? So it's already like a complicated place where, I love you, son, but I was forced to have you. And I never had a choice about you becoming you. But you had your choices of which path to take, because he did. He could have chosen to die as a hero in this war, or to live a long life back in his native land and to live. But then once he has died, he'll be remembered for a generation maybe, or the next one, and then not anymore after that. Whereas he will be remembered forever as a hero of this one war. And he chooses, of course, the hero's path. And that doesn't stop him. She did try, and I did put that in my poem. That's going to be in this one anthology. By the way, I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, I'm very grateful that they took it, because it's like the one poem in this like anthology of like academic writing, and they're including that in there. I footnoted it, but still, it's like, well, thank you for taking my poem.
Yeah.
And I don't steer away from the part where she does take Achilles and try to stick him on an island, right?
Yeah.
The island of women.
She does her best. Yeah.
She does do that. But like after her first thwarted attempt, she's like, okay, that was it. That was my last attempt. And then she like gives him blankets. Like there's this scene in the Iliad where he's unpacking stuff. He's looking for something. And he takes out the blankets that she had given him from that. It's like, how cute is that? It's like,
your mom's sending you to war with blankets.
Yeah, the blankets and the cup for to send libations to Zeus. It's like she's like, no, don't forget the other gods that you have to give libations to. So here's a cup for Zeus. It's like, what a good mommy.
Yeah.
So I guess, and that famous scene where he's sitting there at the shore, and I know lots of people see it as he's sulking there, but instead of seeing him as sulking there, I think of him as praying to his mother. He
Mm-hmm.
sits in his moment of great consternation. And I think I am immature enough to actually see myself in that moment where if somebody had dishonored me in some way, I would be just absolutely pissed off. I would be. And I can't, that's why I think I felt for him too. I'm like, oh, well, okay, let's just say, I mean, it's horrible that it's like it happens. It is it's an enslaved woman. That's his
Yeah.
object. Okay, that sucks.
That's the thing that makes it hard. But if you
That
ignore that part, yeah, it's easy to get to the I'm pissed off. Like
because they're taking away his honor. Like that's the part
Mhm.
that's in his mind is it's an honor. It's a sense of honor, right? So I
Mhm.
guess that's what struck at me is like they are taking away this thing to him that represents honor. Okay, later he also says in the book, which makes things complicated. He uses the word love or fond of many times in this one scene, describing Briseis. And again, which bard had put that in there, which oral tradition had decided that he did love Briseis, but he said it a few times. Like, I love
Mhm.
her. She's my bedmate, might even have been my wife. Like, I'd have to take a look at it. But it
Mhm.
was definitely like it kept saying, I'm fond of her. I love her. I love her, and this, and they're taking her from me. So putting that aside as like, well, okay, fine, even if I'm not looking at that, because that doesn't seem to be that theme doesn't seem to be shown except for that one time. Like,
Mhm.
never have I ever seen him say over and over, and I love her and they took her, except for that one scene. Okay, so I'll have to
Right.
kind of say, okay, so it's not that, it's the honor part of that. Okay,
Mhm.
I really could sit there and go, they took your honor, everybody else had their stuff not taken away, why that thing? Okay, so honor stripped from him. He prays to his mother, like his mother slash goddess. He prays to his mother, like his mother slash goddess. And that's interesting because I mean that's such a particular thing, right? His mother, whom he honors, but also his goddess. That's who he
Mhm.
prays to. When you need somebody, you pray to your God. He prays to his mother
Mhm.
slash goddess, and he knows it's going to be fulfilled. And she comes and she's tender. She holds his hand. She comes from anywhere, right? From the bottom of the sea while she's
Mhm.
hanging out with her father. She hears them. It's like you have your iPhone on you, and it's beeping. Phone call is happening, or your watch, your iWatch is going off, and you're like, oh, gotta go. And she goes, and then she comes up and she holds his hand, and then she says, and he reminds her, that Zeus, you had that power over Zeus. You were the only one who were able to unchain him that one time
Mhm.
when the gods had rebelled against him, which
Mhm.
is a very interesting moment
I love that one.
in
Yeah,
myth,
the
right?
coup.
Like, you were so
Yeah.
powerful that you were able to do this. And why?
Mhm.
And it makes you wonder, why would you do it anyway? Because
Mhm.
this is the same god, or maybe that was
Mhm.
before. Maybe that was before she was forced.
Yeah. Or maybe she just realized too that this will get me something important later.
Maybe so.
You
But
know?
in the timeline of when did Zeus force her to marry a human, that was before, right? That was before that happened.
Mm.
So she and Zeus were still not frenemies. They're still like, she's
Yeah, they were sort of just, he was just there.
yeah, they must have had
Yeah.
some sort of relationship, friendship,
Yeah.
something, right? For her to
Mhm.
care. And she does that. And for whatever reasons it was, but later she's able to hold it to him and say,
Mhm.
here it is. Okay, she does do the supplication thing,
Mhm.
um, where she kneels and she holds his chin,
Mhm.
and she is a suppliant, and she asks for this one thing, which is that the tide of the battle won't turn until Achilles comes back. And
Mm-hmm.
the odd and interesting and phenomenal thing is that the gods didn't get in the way of that. Zeus said, okay. And nobody
Mm-hmm.
questioned it. They're like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
that is asked.
Yeah.
And this is going to happen. What a moment, right?
That is so interesting. I hadn't thought all that much about it. It's so fascinating, but it also reminds me that it's quite interesting in general that Achilles, with the power that he has, the importance of him, that his divinity comes from his mother,
Yes.
because all other heroes, other than Aeneas, which I've also commented in previous conversations about how
Uh-huh.
interesting it is that Aeneas has the same,
Yeah.
that like, yeah, that the god in the family is his mom, and
Yeah.
that's so rare, just because 9 times out of 10 your dad is Zeus,
Oh
because
gosh, when I
he's
get started
prolific.
on the Aeneid, same. I
Hmm.
only care about Aeneas because it's Aphrodite's son.
Yeah, I know. And well, and I do think I find the Aeneas interesting, or the Aeneid interesting, not necessarily for the work itself, in which I often find it a little bit boring. Um, but just the fact that they picked Aeneas to be this founder of Rome mythologically, like out of everybody in the Iliad, but then on top of that, like the Iliad singles him out in a really interesting way if you remind yourself that the Iliad did not see him as a founder of Rome. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like whoever Homer is did not see Aeneas going on to found Rome, but they still made him this very unique character in the Iliad. Like, to explicitly have Aphrodite as his mother is rare. To have her save him from the battlefield in such like an iconic and momentous way that injures her in the process. Like, everything about Aeneas, it kind of connects him to Achilles in the Iliad, like as like the Trojan Achilles, kind of,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way that then having him like much later go on to be this founder of Rome is just so fascinating, because what what was Homer thinking
Yeah.
coming up with Aeneas?
Right.
That's my question, is like, what was his intention? Because it certainly wasn't to have him go found Rome,
Right.
so like, what was his purpose?
And how exactly sexy was Anchises? Apparently quite so. Um,
Well, I mean, but Zeus made her do that, right? Like, that was all on Zeus. Little
that was,
dicks.
yeah, in the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite
Aphrodite, yeah.
6, was it
It's
6? Yeah.
I it's the long one that we have. That's all I know. But yeah, it's
She goes over there and
mhm.
she tells an elaborate tale to
Oh my
Anchises,
god. Yeah,
right?
it's very
Like,
Odysseus.
yeah,
Very
right. And
Odysseus,
yeah,
that
I'm
story,
just
yeah.
this girl, and then just
Yeah.
hanging
But
out.
let me tell you literally every detail about my fake life, like, that
Yeah,
you don't
right.
need to know.
Yeah, but I am the perfect bride for you, you see. So come
Mhm.
take me. And you know, and if it's Zeus that made her do it, what was he thinking, to
Well,
do
isn't
that?
and I forget if it's explicit in the hymn or if it's elsewhere, but wasn't it that she was like the only goddess to have never been with a human, or there was something about it where she had never been with a human and he was trying to like bring her down.
I don't remember. The funny thing is I remember tweeting about it, but I don't remember that first part because I just
Yeah.
zoomed in on like all, hey, what's Aphrodite, like all this funny business that you're saying. Why not just kind of be like, hey, I'm Aphrodite, I'm beautiful, come on.
Yeah.
No, she wanted to be liked for herself or her fake self, or
Yeah.
right.
Well, it's very interesting, and
It's a very interesting.
yeah, and she like prepares herself in this really intricate way and has the Horai, like she has them like prepare her in all of her beauty,
Yeah,
and like make her
it like
look her best and
bridal,
smell
like
her
an
best and all of these things.
sure, like in a very
Yeah.
bridal way, right? So
Yeah.
it's cool because in those
Yeah.
hymns you get to see like what are bridal preparations like, and what kind of clothes were they
Mhm.
wearing, and all that. So I love looking at that, and I think that's what my focus was on that day. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And then she's like, okay, I don't really have time to be a mother though, so I'll they'll watch him for 5 years, and then they'll bring him to you, and then you raise him, and
Yeah, like,
bye
and
bye
I'm
then,
done.
you
I
know.
won't see him again
And
until I save him from a war.
yeah. So all that was it's hard to say which was before the oral traditions in Iliad or the Homeric hymn, or were they happening at the same time? So I'm bringing that up because I'm thinking the two were somehow connected, so that you couldn't get rid of the idea of Anchises, Aphrodite, and Aeneas, and somehow they were in this war for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And then
Yeah.
Virgil picks that up later, going, now that's got possibilities. It's got lots of
Yeah.
possibilities. Let's go with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Aphrodite so very much. She's just
Me too. Yeah, she's like how
she's
I got into
scary.
mythology. She is scary, but she
Yeah?
also, for me, what I love. Oh yeah, absolutely. She was number one.
Oh,
For
tell
sure.
me.
Like when I was a kid.
What was your first? Yeah.
I wish I remembered enough. I don't have a great memory of what exactly got me in. I just know that it was Aphrodite, as like Aphrodite in general. She's just wonderful.
With
Yeah.
Aphrodite, I think probably my first exposure to her was the Botticelli Venus. And I was raised in the Philippines, so I was like 8.5 years old. And so, red-haired people, blonde people, we do get them because we're such a mixed people. We have Europeans in my family. If an alien ever wanted to land and get like a population sample, just come to my family, and we have we have all the various continents in our in my genetics. But it's still like, I remember when I was in elementary school, we had some blonde kids and we had some redhead kids, but it's still like rare, within a population. Most of us just have brown hair. We can be pale, we can be dark, we can be my color, but still like red hair. Oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
the Botticelli Venus image always like struck me as, okay, that's I'm not sure I saw her as more beautiful or anything, but just like, oh, that's what beautiful looks like to them, I guess, is what I was thinking. Like, okay, that's okay, all right. On a shell though, what's up with a shell? And then that actually got me curious, like, a shell? Why a shell?
What's up with that shell?
Yeah, what's going on? Then I started, looking at the two myths of her, and the Iliad one just makes her Zeus's daughter.
Yeah, I don't like that.
No, me neither.
I don't go with that one. That's no fun.
No,
No
that
fun.
is not fun. The Theogony, the Hesiod weird.
That's the fun.
Weird SH star T thing. Ooh, yeah, that Hesiod was all sorts of fun, weird.
I call her
stuff.
she of the castration foam.
Oh, I love it. There
That's
you are.
my name for the podcast.
Oh my gosh.
To the point where people quote it to me quite often with like even TM at the end.
Yes.
I love that I've inflicted this upon a population of young people. Like Aphrodite, she of the castration foam.
Pontos plus Uranus equals Aphrodite.
Yeah.
And I point that out to my students, poor students, but they get this myth. I'm like, I'm gonna tell you myth. Have a drink of water first before we listen to this strange myth. And I said it's a very, like, here's the ocean, but he's called Pontos, at least in that myth. I know there's someone had pointed out that in another one, in the Orphic myth, it's another ocean, but in this one, in Theogony, it's Pontos. So in this one, which I enjoy, it's like it's a masculine being plus a very masculine Uranus equals a hyper feminine. Oh, and then she hangs out with Himeros and Eros on that island. I love that. I'm like, oh, and what do they do? What do these three love gods do? on this, and it's so cool because it's like Aphrodite's born, and Eros is like, hey, Hymenos, check her out. Let's go and hang out with her. And then that's like end of story with that,
Yeah.
and then when she goes to Kithra and so on, it's like from
Mhm.
Kypros, she goes to Kithra, but it's like, but first when she's there, the other love gods are hanging with her, and I'm always like, oh, I want to know the fanfic that goes on there, like what's happening. Does
Especially
Diony?
if you make Eros not her son in that case.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because in
Yeah.
in Theogony, he's the
He's
supreme being of
chaos or
love,
born of
right? He's
chaos. Yeah.
until he's born, no procreation happens. If you noticed,
Mhm.
so that always
Mhm.
struck me too. Like, okay, and Eros is called the most beautiful god in Hesiod's Theogony, which is a very wonderful, interesting set of myths.
There's a lot. I read from Theogony a lot. I really enjoy so much of it,
It's
and then
so
sometimes I'll.
enjoyable, it's so
It
fun.
really is. It's so wonderful. But then sometimes, like I covered Pandora earlier, and it's so interesting when you go from like just the general theogony, creation of everything, and then you get to the creation of Pandora, and you're getting like some ideas, I think, about how Hesiod saw women. And then you read the Pandora from Works and Days, and you're
Yes,
like,
right.
okay, this is how Hesiod saw
Yeah,
women, and it's
yeah.
not good.
Yeah, right. At that point, you're all, oh, do I need to reread everything else then? Um,
Exactly.
but you wonder which parts are made by him and which parts were oral tradition and which parts,
Hmm.
because of course the creation things, stories like that, they echo other traditions, which is why it seems so similar to the beginning creation, the Bible
Hmm.
story, right? Because it's coming from the same place somehow. When things are created, and love is in there, Aphrodite is always so scary when she sends in, when Eros slash Cupid is later seen as her son for whatever
Hmm.
reason, right? Someone decided that Eros can't just be himself doing his own thing.
See, for me, I see it as like I appreciate the two different variations, but I see it more as when they wanted to start making stories where Eros is like, silly and like kind of a troublemaker, and he's causing trouble, then they had to make him more of a traditional god. Like they had to make him the son of an Olympian instead of this like primordial superhuman being, because I think the Eros that springs from chaos is too like impressive and powerful and primordial to then be associated with, shooting Apollo or Daphne with an arrow. Like that's too, it's almost too human for a god like that. Like they don't have the primordial beings doing much in the way of troublemaking, of like causing grief. So I feel like they had to make him much more accessible and like human in a way that, it's still, he's still a god, but that's how he's more of a child of an Olympian, a Hermes style versus, like prime. It's like seeing Gaia doing something silly like that versus, Hermes.
Yeah, I agree with you on Eros slash Cupid is much more accessible,
Mm-hmm.
and easily written into stories
Mm-hmm.
than this scary love god, right?
Yeah.
Who comes out of nowhere. Like, so chaos is somehow happens, Gaia
Mm-hmm.
somehow happens, Eros somehow happens, Tartarus somehow happens inside Gaia, but she doesn't create Tartarus. It's like these
Mm-hmm.
first four were created out of nowhere. Like
Well, to
they're
me it's
there.
like the Big Bang.
Yeah.
It's
Boom, 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 right?
it's very like, okay, it's like,
Whatever
theories
chaos
connected to what we
is.
believe now.
Yeah, everything
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
nothing. Gaia, which is a nurturing body, something that can later house so many things. Tartarus, by the way, Tartarus is just a weird thing. Like, I'm just like,
Oh, I call it like all the parts of a noun, like a person, place, and a thing. Tartarus
inside Gaia,
is
like,
all of it.
yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like inside her, just like, okay, whatever. Like she's just like, whoa, all right, what is that? And then Eros as a just a supreme force, a power, a feeling that moves us so much, and it's unexplainable. Happens before the concept of death,
Mm.
before the concept of fate is just is, at least in the
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm. I'm always so interested. I don't know enough about Orphic mythology, but I don't know how much I want to ask because I feel like there's
Yeah,
just so much. I don't know
yeah,
anything about Orphic mythology, I should
uh-huh.
say, except for like a certain handful of the gods that are only, or not necessarily like even a handful, but like the certain people that are only in Orphic mythology because people will
There
ask me about
are,
them, and I'm just kind
yeah,
of like,
yeah,
ooh, I'm gonna back right off. Like I don't want to talk about Zagreus. I don't know.
right. I keep looking
Yeah.
at that, going, okay, I need to look up these gods and see where else they show up. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there are like 4 or 5 that so
Yeah.
far,
They're
are
yeah.
so uncommon that like they don't appear anywhere else, it seems, except in Orphic myth.
Yeah.
But yeah, hands off Zagreus for a bit there, and
Yeah,
it was
anything Orphic. I'm like, it's just it feels like it's too daunting. I don't know where I haven't bought a single book on Orphic. I keep, it's like on the end of my list of things I'll get to eventually.
I have to say that the Iliad versions of Athena and the Odyssey versions of Athena, I never liked, and and especially I didn't like any Ovid Athena. I'm like,
Yeah, Ovid Athena's problematic.
what in the world? So I never really understood like why, or even the place, right, the place about her. I'm like,
Mm,
you guys don't worship Athena clearly, because you make her sound like an awful being, unless this is how you choose to, like, this is how she's worshipped. She's really an awful, a dread goddess of some sort.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't understand. But when I read the Orphic hymns versions of Athena, I'm like, oh, the wise goddess. Okay, so that's how you view her. Like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
not the awful goddess who does this and that, but also this. I started seeing her that way. Like, okay,
Mm.
that's how she was worshipped. I see. So I could venerate a goddess who's like wise, and I guess the her springing from the head of Zeus thing and her being Zeus's pet daughter just always bugged, even from Theogony.
Oh yeah, I mean, I always see her as like, I mean, I love her. I love Athena, but I see her as the man's goddess. Like
Yeah,
yeah, she's the one who has, a lot of traditionally masculine characteristics. She always sides with the men, she always sides with the heroes. Like she seems like the goddess that the men developed to have a woman in the room, but who they could associate with all of their varied, like, hyper masculine, important, like,
yeah,
quote unquote important qualities, all these things. So yeah, she seems to me like a goddess developed by men versus a
yes,
goddess developed by like the culture itself.
right. But there, I do think this part was interesting, reading the Theogony, or was it from the Theogony? But
Mm.
there's this idea that the reason why Zeus had to consume Metis is because Metis's son was
Mm.
going to be more powerful
Mhm.
than the sire, kind of like the Thetis idea. And
Mhm.
so Athena was supposed to be a boy,
Mm.
but somehow was female. So was it
Mhm.
like did a transformation occur inside Zeus, so
Yeah,
that,
did she like bond with Matus in a different
in a
way,
way, yeah,
maybe?
yeah, so
Yeah.
that when she's born, she is wearing armor that is should that traditionally, because they're not thinking Amazons here, they're thinking
Mhm.
goes to on a Greek warrior. So that's a man's warrior aspect that she's wearing, as if she's supposed to be the son of Zeus, but female. And the fact that she's female makes her not a threat to Zeus.
Yeah.
Just the fact that she's that sex, not male. That little difference, or big difference, is a big difference. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've only ever considered that myth, or I don't know if it's the translations I've read or what. It's been a long time. But just that it's like Metis's child would be more powerful. But I didn't necessarily read it or find it as explicitly her son. But that makes it very interesting. And sort of, to me, it really suggests that, yeah, by eating Metis, Zeus had her like basically form with the son that was within her and develop Athena kind of based on that. Like Athena is sort of both, which kind of, lends itself to Athena also being, a goddess who isn't really ever with men or women. She's she's a
unique
some
being.
would argue asexual. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a lot kind of going on when it comes to her and her gender, her sexuality, all of that is sort of up for debate in an interesting way.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Why do you like Athena?
I think I just like that there's a goddess that powerful, that important, that revered, that respected, because they really do in the stories, but also like in the way that she, is the patron goddess of so many cities. Like they really treated her differently than the other goddesses in a way that I find interesting.
Yeah,
and
wisdom,
so
war,
like
and weaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
all that. When you think of, oh my gosh, I mean, it's such a rabbit hole. When I think of the various goddesses, I adore Leto and her children. Hermes. Wow, I mean, Hermes.
I love him so much.
Hermes. He has a Rabdos. He has a Rabdos like Kirke has a Rabdos. It's a wand, but it's not a Thyrsus. It's a Rabdos. But Kirke has the same. It's the same word used for him having this thing as the one that Kirke has. The magic wand that she wields, same word that he has. He has a Rabdos.
Interesting.
It is interesting. It's like,
well, especially because I mean, they're connected in an interesting way of, Hermes kind of rolling up to Odysseus and explicitly telling him how to, basically defeat, not officially, but get past Kirke's Circe. I want to call her Kirke. I want to start
Kirke, please say Kirke.
I know it's accurate. And I say that every time I say her name, I do like clarify, but everyone in English knows her as Circe, so it's just sort of come out that way.
Sure, yeah.
It's interesting because they are linked in that way of, him rolling up and giving Odysseus moly and being like, this is exactly how to get past her. And,
holy moly, Batman. That's where they get it from. It's so funny.
Is that where they get it?
Yeah.
Is that where the word comes from?
Oh, it's a holy moly, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. My Hermes is so underrated.
I mean, even just this comedic value in the hymn is like
a little baby child.
Perfection.
A little baby. Yeah, a little baby
doing
child.
Everything. And he does everything as a baby.
Yeah.
The most ridiculous things. I mean, inventing the lyre as a sort of, it's almost an aside. It's like not even the main point of the story. It's like, oh, he stumbled upon this tortoise, and he figured, hey, like maybe I'll kill it, empty out its body, and I'll invent this lyre.
A little baby child.
Yeah, and then he'll go on as a baby and steal the cows and go on this whole like gallivanting journey across Greece, and then oh my god, I just absolutely love him. He's so entertaining, and I don't even know. But the connection with Kirke is very interesting, of them both having the same staff or Rabdos
wand. Rabdos.
Yeah, and just the connection between them and that, I don't know. It's all. I don't think I had a point with it, but it's fascinating.
It's true. Like if you sit there and think about like, why did he show up? Why did he care?
Exactly.
How'd he know? How'd he know how to counteract it? Like,
yeah. And why?
Like why? Yeah.
Like, was it part of his troublemaking nature? If so, there wasn't really any follow-up. Like, he just sort of shows up, helps Odysseus and then is gone, and
Yeah.
then the rest of the storyline
Like,
is
who
all to
sent
do with
him?
Odysseus and Kirke. Like, yeah, yeah.
Usually he's the messenger, but in this case, doesn't seem like
No,
anybody
he's just
sent him.
there.
Seemed like it was his
Exactly.
idea. Like, why?
Well, and
What
he's so
happened?
explicitly the messenger elsewhere in the Odyssey, where he's the one who goes and tells Calypso, like, you have to let him go. Like,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
time's up.
As
You
you
got to do
said.
it. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's explicitly acting in that case as a messenger. But yeah, when it comes to being on Ayaya and the Moli, it's just like, nah, I'm just here. I think I'm just gonna do
I
this, like,
think
all in my own will.
see, that's why I love Madeline so very much,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because, um, uh, 3 years ago or whatever, when before Cersei, she calls it Cersei.
Yeah.
Before Cersei became big, and I first heard about it, I sent her my song. That's the only one that I did an English version and an ancient Greek. So that
Mm.
one, I took the part where Kirki was saying, why are you so silent, Odysseus? That one, but
Mm-hmm.
then with my own poetry, I did like a part two where she's watching him and saying goodbye and stuff, and so, or at least my lyrics, which was based off
Mm-hmm.
of like a poem, because you have to take poem and make lyrics different. you know Madeline, I love her so much because she really researched and thought about these weird things we're talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
she made Hermes a lover of Kirkis, so
Mm-hmm.
that, like, that explains like why he was hanging around her island. Gosh, wow. I mean, I love rabbit holing about mythology in general. And then, this is just ancient Greek mythology. As you probably know, I also look at ancient Egyptian, and but I am such a beginner in ancient Egyptian and any
Mm.
Sumerian myths. Like, absolutely, I have years and years, perhaps a decade or so, to catch up. And then anytime people ask me to write a song about something, I will look at the myths first, which might be a strange place to look, but I find that myths tell me a lot about traditions and attitudes of the ancient times. And then to compare it with the attitudes and ideas of people today is always fascinating, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course the ancient ones reflect the different times, different population, perhaps, and but even so, even if it's a different population, it's like the people of today still somehow connect to it. Like,
Oh yeah.
what do those myths mean to you? How does it resonate to you, with you? And, like, for instance, my latest project is to write three short songs for short films for an excavation project in Sinop
Mm.
in Turkey. I have
Ooh.
not researched the myths of that area, but now I'm excited. Like, okay, wow, all right,
Yeah.
that's fun. Just, when I was asked to do the American Institute of Archaeology for Honolulu, for Hawaii,
Mm.
lecture on some ancient Egyptian songs, I right away, went into the Book of the Dead. I started there, and then kind of went back and read for 3 straight months on mythology and history and culture of ancient Egypt. Because to me, that's how I get into songs. Like, I won't
Mm.
just dive in and just start writing. Like, even if you give me the text and stuff to pronounce, it's no, I will go
Yeah.
into it. I want to be able to speak about these things with depth and with meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And myths are just so full of meaning and angst and pain and hope and dreams and just fun stories, fun facts, fun
Oh
stories.
yeah.
Stories being what they are.
And they're just so universal. They just,
So very.
that's the thing, right? They're universal stories, and even when the time period, the politics, the people, everything is so different from us today. Like, the stories themselves are just human stories,
Yep.
and that's what makes them so fascinating. And it is so interesting to look at them. Like, I mean, obviously that's what I do on this show, is look at the myths from a modern lens, and look at them, in the world that they were in, and also try to pull apart what it means for us today, and also often, how the the world they were in then, isn't necessarily, it's more so it's influenced by the outside factors, like they're the people who don't like my show love to complain about very set things of like,
Block and
oh,
mute
she
them.
hates. Oh, I do, but it's entertaining now. Thankfully, I've reached a level where it doesn't bother me. Like I'm, but it's so interesting because they tell on themselves in their reviews so
Sure.
often.
Sure.
Like the latest one I got was somebody who was like, she hates them. She hates the men. She clearly hates her life choices,
Oh
that
my
this is what
gosh.
she's doing, and I'm like,
Wow.
I have been doing this for 4 years, and like I make a full living off of reading or of researching mythology and bringing it to people. Like, I don't hate anything about these myths. I just think maybe if I'm telling a story where a man assaults a woman, like I'm going to talk about like that, like it's a bad thing, because it is.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's it's so interesting to the way people interpret that, but also it's so interesting the way that it's understood by, and I don't necessarily mean academia in this because I'm so not in academia, but the way people understand myths and then hang on to them as this, like original myth, that term,
Oh.
that
Oh
nonsensical
yes.
term
Yes.
of the way people want to treat specifically so often, say, Hesiod, as if like Hesiod's stories were the be all and end all. It was absolutely what all of ancient Greece believed, and you
Oh
cannot
yeah.
deny that.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like the absurdity of that. So many pieces of that are so
Mhm.
wrong,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Like the regionality aside, the idea that just because this one man's writing is all we have on a certain thing, or the earliest that we have on a certain thing, doesn't remotely suggest that it's what everyone believed, that it was widely understood. Like it's so interesting to look at it and just kind of consider what else might have existed then, what people might have believed that might have completely contradicted something that Hesiod said, but we don't have it. All we have is Hesiod, and kind of what that means for what we believe. Often it to me, it comes down to the way women were treated, because I'm sure that there were so many stories where the women weren't, treated like garbage, or, where we have these like other understandings of certain things that we just don't happen to have them, because either they weren't written down or they got lost, or the reason they weren't written down was because it wasn't the powerful men telling the stories, right? And so like, of course, those are the people whose stories are getting written down and passed on, and it's just so interesting to consider the things that we don't have that might have existed back then, because you know
I
I
think
don't
that's
know, it
why
could go
I
on
find
forever. Yeah.
Sappho and Corina
Mm.
so interesting. The fact that they were written about um, so respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like it's a fact. Okay, these are fabulous women poets, and they're the best poets of their time, especially Sappho and her playing her songs. And it's like, and there was no derision
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever, when they say these things, like no, not even a hint, like, and it was wrong for her to do or like anything, or for
Yeah.
a woman, it was just like, no, she was the
Yeah.
best. And
Mm-hmm.
so it makes me wonder, regionally, was something going on with Lesvos at the time, which is interesting because it's smacking right there, like the border of the mainland Turkey today, like what
Mm-hmm.
was Leto coming from also around that area, seems to have, right,
Mm.
and her children going this way.
Mm,
In
right.
the myths, she was not welcome. She and her
Mm-hmm.
birth and her children were not welcome in the beginning. And like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, and now Apollo is like Greek and Roman, and they didn't even bother changing his name. He's so great. Like, but in the beginning, it's something
Mm-hmm.
about that movement from east to west. Aphrodite also east to west. Like, these are Eastern gods. Dionysus
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Oh yeah,
Eastern
absolutely.
gods who were later accepted, venerated, and became so very Greek, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially
Mm-hmm.
Apollo. Like,
I find Apollo so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
For the Roman of it, that
Mm-hmm.
is so interesting that he's like the only god who has the same name, save for Bacchus being, a Greek name of Dionysus as well. But yeah, Apollo being Apollo is so fascinating. And then on top of that, like, I think it's so interesting how he sort of took over so many important things from other gods. You know,
God, sun god. I mean,
sun god, absolutely. That's the most
how,
obvious one.
right?
Yeah. Like poor Helios, sorry guy, you're gone.
Yeah.
But even like, before that became sort of the accepted, like Apollo's the god of the sun, which of course is quite, it happened later. But even just the fact that you have these muses, you have these goddesses of art and music, but Apollo's the real god of art and music, and he's kind of this like umbrella of the muses. He kind of holds them in. And then same with the oracle. The oracle was originally this matriarchal kind of figure, deity, more so connected with Gaia and all of this. And then Apollo comes and he takes over oracular prophecy, just like he took over all these things. And
Yeah.
to me, he is so fascinating in that way because he became this supremely important figure, this sun god, this god of everything.
Healing music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything beautiful and important and plague.
Yeah.
But then yeah, to have him having sort of explicitly, not in the stories taken these things from these goddesses, but you can see how he did. You can't see kind of when it happened, but the fact that there are the muses and the oracle and all of this, but they all fall under the umbrella of Apollo,
They're all
just seems
connected
so
to him.
so
Yeah.
interesting to
Even
me.
like
Yeah.
people forget when I say, "Hey, yeah, it's Zeus and his oracles." They're like, "No, I thought it was Apollo." I'm like, "No, it's
No.
Zeus and his oracles." And then Zeus, even in hymn to Hermes, says, Apollo will has my oracles. It's just him. It's just him, son. He
Mm-hmm.
says to Hermes, "I'm sorry, you can't also have the oracle thing going on." But we'll throw in the bee women to you.
I don't think I know what about the bee women.
Oh yes.
What is the story with the bee
Oh my
women?
gosh. So in Hymn to Hermes, and this is a song that I started as well. There's this part
Mm-hmm.
where the bee women are three women who have wings and they tell oracles. And he can hang out with them. He's allowed to hang out with them. But that's as close as he can get to oracles. He himself can't be partaking in oracles as Zeus and Apollo can,
Yeah.
but he can hang out with them. But it's like, okay, very interesting. Tell me more about these bee women. Well, they when they have honey, you must feed them, because if you don't feed them honey, then they become very upset. If you feed them honey, then they will give you oracles.
Amazing.
Amazing. I
Weird.
know.
I love it.
Hymn to Hermes. Yeah.
I feel like I read a portion of the hymn to Hermes on the podcast, but it's so long that I
So
cut
long.
off, and I thought I'd read the rest, but maybe I didn't.
Oh,
And
now
I'm
you
okay,
got to
cool. I
read
have to
it.
go back and finish it. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
I started a song,
Yeah.
where I should say I composed the song, but I just haven't recorded. I have so many songs. Liv, I have so
I
many
bet.
songs
I mean, I
that I
have.
haven't
Yeah.
recorded. Like, what I tend to do is I give a rough draft version. I'm like, this is a song I composed. I haven't recorded it, but here it is. And if you guys are interested, like, Patreon me,
Mhm.
which I only started like a month ago.
Oh, you have a Patreon now?
I do. I
Okay.
do have a Patreon now,
Good to
Liv.
know. Good. I will share it all in the podcast. I have a habit of joining. I think I'm a patron of like every classics person.
I just started it like a month ago, and I, I was, and it's just my name. It's just Bettina Joy De Guzman.
Great. I was gonna ask.
Yeah. It's I hung back from doing Patreon for the longest time because I had nothing to offer except my, like, I mean, I have no time to do tiers. Like, if you do this, then I give you this. I'm like, no,
Mhm.
that's the whole point, is I don't have time. Like, I just but I believed in the idea of learning about ancient music and putting it out to the public, and not having it stuck in academic journals. Not that I have time anyway, as a public high school teacher.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And with a 14-year-old child, a son, I mean, most people would be like, whoa. And you're a single working mother, and you do that. And that must be everything. I go, yeah, somehow I carve out time to also study up on, theater and ancient Greek music, and in ancient music in general, even,
Mm-hmm.
and and give it to the public, because that was the reason I wanted to do it in the first place. And, my first couple of
Mm-hmm.
songs was out of curiosity. I'm like, I didn't know about this in grad school, and I would like people to know about it who are in grad school or
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, and I would like my high school students to know about it, and not have it, written in an academic journal, and then that's all, and they'll never see it. So when I try to interview people for California Classical Association South, which is a panel I put together twice a year, and when I had put together that panel for CHS, for Center for Hellenic Studies, the idea was, and then I would have that right to put it in out in public, or at least link their stuff over to the public, so that they can access it. And
Mm-hmm.
because a journal is only for academics, really, nobody
Mm-hmm.
reads it. I'm sorry, they
No,
don't,
no. I mean, I don't. Yeah.
because it's too dense. The material is too
Mm-hmm.
dense and too,
Well,
you
it's
know
more so also about like trying to find those things.
that's
Like
it
they're,
too.
if you're
Yeah,
not in that world, you don't know where to look, you don't know where they're
yeah.
coming out. Like no one has the time to just start searching around constantly everywhere for all the different, yeah.
And if it's
Yeah,
stuck
it's
just in
tough.
JSTOR, and it's got a
Oh,
paywall,
exactly.
so
Mhm.
I would much rather, like, ask a lovely, friendly academic, like, Armand Dangur, can you please talk about, ancient music? Stefan Hago, can you please talk about, the aulos to us? Since you're an expert, can you talk about this? Or even
Mhm.
out of that world, interviewing Andy West with his upcoming book about prison life, and how classics helped. What is that all about? Like, what
Mm.
is the connection? What do people in prison think about the classics? How does it relate to them, and all that? I think about
Mhm.
those things, like, how else would anybody know that those things exist, unless it's like
Mhm.
put in a podcast or put in a YouTube channel, where it's accessible. Like, how would you
Mhm.
know?
I mean, yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, it sounds like so much of why I, have my podcast and all of those things, because it's so lovely to spread those things more broadly
Yeah.
and yeah, beyond the realm of academia.
Well,
Mhm.
my kids love your podcast, and so I will have to just really go through and say, which ones, or just blip out certain things that, so in case, when my admin comes in and says, "What are you watching?" and the whole thing can be actually watched, and it's like, yeah, yes, we're talking, myth, and because my kids love myth so very much, and whether
Mhm.
it's my ancient Greek class or my Latin class, there's a certain point where we talk just myth, and especially the
Yeah.
weird wild stuff. And let me just close up the episode, because we've been talking now for like two
I
hours
know, yeah, I was gonna
and
I was
and
gonna do that too.
I mean, I can keep talking to you forever, Liv. This is just, if you ever want me to be a guest of it, later, whatever.
Yeah, well.
Goodness, I mean, obviously I can talk on and on about stuff, but I just want to close up. And that's why I
Mhm.
love to sing about, especially female deities and
Mhm.
queens, because I just feel like they're just not celebrated enough. Okay. I'll have to say I have my exceptions, like Apollo and Hermes, but then that's because the bee women are in Hermes, and also Apollo's muses, but they're just so odd and weird. But Artemis, I want to
Mhm.
sing of Artemis, Artemis the huntress, Artemis the, also she plays the lyre. She's depicted in many iconography as playing the lyre and dancing along with her brother. But,
Mm.
like, we always just think, oh, Artemis the huntress, Artemis the whatever moon goddess, and the virgin goddess. But it's like, yeah, but also Artemis, like the one who plays the lyre and hangs out and sings and dances. So I've pictured her as, like, have you ever seen capoeira dancing, and women like dancing capoeira?
I have not.
So powerful. Oh my gosh,
Mm.
because here's this, like, bow-like instrument, right? That's just this,
Mhm.
and that's going on, and the women are dancing capoeira, and I'm like, oh, I that's how in my head I would picture Artemis dancing like that, with that sound of the bowstring going on, and she's doing war dances, basically war training style dances. So
Mhm.
That's how I picture her in my head. And
Yeah.
it I
I
keep
mean, it's very Artemis.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, more than just like doing the circle dances. I mean, circle dance is good and all, but acrobatic dancing while circle dancing, yeah, most definitely. Most
Oh,
definitely.
interesting. I've never thought about any of that. Those parts. It's never the music and the dancing and everything has never kind of come up for me. So this is just so interesting. So different. Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Why don't
you.
you thank you. Why don't you tell everyone where to find you? And I'll link to everything in the episode's description as well. But just tell all my listeners where they can learn more and where they can listen to your music and all these different things,
Oh,
please.
yes. Okay. So, listeners of this glorious podcast, I can be found on just uh, BettinaJoyDeGuzman.com. I know I have a long name. I'm sorry. And for Bettina Joy happens to be a common Filipino name, apparently. So it has to be the whole thing. All right. BettinaJoyDeGuzman.com. And that once you go there, it has all my links to YouTube music, YouTube, my own channel, Spotify, um, Amazon. So therefore Amazon Music and there's Apple Music there. I'm just in all the major
You're
ones.
everywhere.
These are
Yeah.
what have you. All up, all
Lovely.
there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I will link so that people don't have to type in your name. I'll link to an episode description, which means people are more likely to visit it because they don't have to type it in. So just
Oh,
check the
thank
episode's
you.
description.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. This has been so much fun. Oh, nerds, thank you all so much. As always, it's just so much fun to have these conversations. I actually went through like a bit of a stint last month where I recorded like 9 or 10 in 1 week, I think, or in 2 weeks rather. That would have been too much. But Bettina Joy was one of them, and it was just so much fun. There was so much going on in my head at all the times because I had spoken to so many people in such short period of time. So anyway, it was really so much fun. I absolutely love these conversations, as I say every time, but they're just such a thrill. It's so cool to learn everything myself and then teach it all to you guys through these conversations. It's quite fun. I feel very lucky. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, a quick reminder to please submit your questions to the beginning of the new year Q&A. That's mythsbaby.com/questions. And stay tuned for Helen next week. Fucking Helen. Oh my god, cannot wait for it. Thank you all. I am Liv, and I love this shit.